Welcome to the Power Lunch live on LinkedIn. I'm Rhett Power, your host. We do this program every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and a lot of Fridays around 12 noon Eastern Standard Time on LinkedIn's new platform, LinkedIn Live. Now, today's, the point of the show is to talk to today's leaders, thought leaders, CEOs, corporate leaders, best-selling authors, people like that, people who are really doing interesting things in the world, trying to make it a better place. We want to learn from them. We want to learn about their habits. We want to learn about their secrets. We want to learn about what makes them successful and their companies successful. Now, the fun part about the show is that it's interactive. In order for that to happen, you've got to ask questions. And I know Eugene, who's with me today, will certainly engage with us on LinkedIn. And if we have questions during the show, we can certainly answer them. Now, I want you to ask questions because I think that's one of the reasons why we're here is to interact with you. Now, we are simulcasting this on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Social Live. And so that's unique. It's interesting. And that's all possible because of Social Live and their platform. If you love the program or like it, hope you love it, give it a like or share, and so that your network can benefit from our guests just like you are doing. And so it's time to learn from the best. Eugene Frazier is a leadership strategist. He is an executive coach, an Marshall Goldsmith executive coach. He's an organizational effectiveness expert. He's on the Forbes Coaching Council, and he's CEO of EF Choice and Associates, and he happens to be a friend. Eugene, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Rhett, I'm excited about being here. I'm always looking forward to talking to you.
Likewise, man. I always learn when I talk to you. You've got this wisdom that just kind of flows from you. So it's always for me always something to learn. I want to ask you and talk to you a little bit tonight and this afternoon about leadership and transition. How can we be better? What can we do that's better? How can we move forward? And to me, so if you're not in the mindset of that, then that means that you're probably stagnant, that you're not moving forward like you should. And so many leaders that I coach and I work with, when you talk about change and transition, the eyes get big and that worried look comes across the face, across
Absolutely.
the brow. And it seems to be a scary thing. And so what is your take on leadership and transition? And I just sort of think that'd be an interesting thing to ask you.
Okay. So, Rhett, I think that the best way to answer your question is I need to give you a little bit of a framework to give you a feel for how I think, process, and begin to look at these kind of issues when I'm working with leaders in my practice. And one of the things that first come to mind to me, in order for you to really focus in on transition and change, and let me just let everybody know that you can't use one word unless it's synonymous with the next one as it relates to change and transition. They are essentially one and the same, but come in phases and various levels of experience for a person. So when I think about transition, a lot of the literature out in the industry from really renowned companies that say their focus is around change and transition, what I've found, they tend to take it from an individual perspective to a broader organizational perspective. Wrong thing to do, because I'm a firm believer, as you stated, Rhett, earlier, that change is not something that occurs in a general cycle. You can never fix it and it go away because another opportunity comes back. And so it's really, I tend to do, I would say, diagrams and or pictorials. If I want to tell a story, I use a circle because it's a never-ending process. It's an ongoing level of refinement and iteration. So if I'm talking about a leader, the best way to come at it is looking at it from a system theory perspective. So for those of you who may not be as familiar with system theory, let me just chat with you a little bit about what that means. That simply means that you're looking at the whole environment and you're looking at all of the functional pieces that are independent, dependent, and interdependent, because there's overlap and connectivity across those. And anytime there's an issue that occurs with one aspect of the system, it's a ripple effect throughout the organization. And so that's one perspective to look at it. Don't look at it as, this is my organization, this is the people who work for me, this is who I work for, this is the organization I'm working for. Look at it as a system, and then look at its intricate pieces, then you can get a better understanding. The other one that I would just toss out is this notion of transition versus change. Transition doesn't just naturally occur. It has to be prompted and positioned appropriately for it to occur. And for all you leaders out there who automatically say, my organization is in change, and I now have to go after and facilitate it, you are a few steps ahead of yourself. Because here's what I would encourage you to think about. Think about the fact that, how am I managing the change? How am I dealing and processing with it personally as a senior leader? I would encourage you to say, from your perspective, and I want to use myself as an example, Eugene, the organization around you is going through dynamic change. How are you coping with it? What's your role in it? And are you aware of all of the pitfalls that you're going to be responsible to cascade down to your employees and get them on board to help you march through the process of change and transition? So I would encourage you to think about it in terms of developing and improving your awareness from the inside out.
What does that look like in practical terms, right? So I'm a leader, I'm in an organization, we're going through significant change. Sometimes you know that's coming, sometimes you don't. What's the skill set, as a CEO or a C-suite leader, that they need to have to sort of manage change? Is there a particular set of skills that are helpful in managing the process?
Okay, that's an excellent question, Rhett. I would say that there definitely is, and I call them cornerstones for success. And cornerstone for success when you're dealing with transition and change, as I talked about this whole notion of operating and working from the inside out, it has more to do with how are you looking at your people in order to affirm and appreciate them. And I would say that in order for us to really learn the skill of affirming and appreciating ourselves, we have to first do that for us. So as a leader, I have to say, okay, Eugene, you're in this environment. What are you good at? And what are you not so good at? Because you got a bunch of people who are waiting for you to lead them and ready for you to facilitate them through a process. And if I'm feeling like I don't know truly what's going on, the best thing to do ever in an environment is to be ultimate transparency in terms of your people and talking with them about, here's what I know, here's what I don't know, here's what we have to figure out in between. Keyword, we. And part of that is being able, once you can affirm and appreciate you where you're at and your competencies, your skills, your knowledge, and your abilities to be able to manage this, you now have to transfer that to your employees. And I would say the next step that you want, and Rhett, I'm going to get you later because you're forcing me to give away incredible things. But I would say the next step is, how do you incorporate people in your process? Find key leaders that are in critical path positions that have a vested interest on the environment being successful, and put them into the brainstorming exploration stage, and then move them from there to the decision stage on how we need to manage and facilitate the process going forward. The other, go ahead.
Well, is that that was the lead into a question, because is that, how do you get buy-in? And that you sort of alluded to it a little bit there, right? How do you get the rest of the team, the rest of the staff, all the employees to sort of buy into that process once the leader's ready to lead and be open and honest about it and transparent? How do you get the rest of the people on board and to understand where what's next, what's coming down, and to be okay with it? I guess my question is, how do you get people in the right mindset to accept that change?
So, as you know, in any given environment, people in an organization, we all process information differently. We all have very different coping skills and mechanisms that we rely on to get us through the change. It's going to be important that the leader really knows their employees. They have to have that developed trust prior to the change occurring. And if you're in flux and you haven't achieved that yet, you're really going to struggle, because you are looking, when you're in the time of transition and change, you're looking to connect to the minds and hearts of your people. And if you don't have a true trusting relationship, you can't even begin your process. You don't have followers because you have not pulled them into your inner circle.
Okay. I interrupted you earlier about you weren't finished with that.
Okay. What would you like for me to pick up?
Well, I mean, you were talking about, you had said, bring certain people into the process, certain leaders, certain,
yes.
You move them to the conclusion or to the end stage, but that's where you were. So you're getting ready on that. So
let me step back then. So bringing the individuals in place that are in critical positions. And when I say critical positions, what I mean by that, if you're looking at your senior leaders, and if anything's going to stop production, it's going to stop sales, it's going to stop flow to the result of being able to get a return on everything you're doing, you want those people in your decision-making process, because they are facilitating it for you on a day-to-day basis. Now, the other thing I would encourage you to consider anytime you're dealing with change and transition, and I want to differentiate this, I'm going to talk about transition first, and then I'll talk about change second, and we'll kind of demarcate them a little bit. Transition in itself, we're all going to approach very different. But when you're looking at change at a macro level, you want to look at the broad thing in totality, and that transition is going to be what everyone is going to experience. They're just going to have different experiences based on the entity in which they work in on a day-to-day basis. So it becomes as simple as, so for our division in this company, let's talk about the implications of the change that's on the horizon. What's the positive? What's the not so positive? And then what's the overall negative effect that we need to begin to manage, understand, and start our early process of mitigation and better understanding of turning things around for as much information we may have at that particular time. Mm-hmm. The second, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish. Yeah.
The second aspect, when I talk about change, and I tend to use a variety of models, but I'm more user-friendly with one, and it's by William Bridges, which basically approach the whole notion of change from a system perspective. It kind of ties into my earlier thought process about looking at what you're doing in a system format. And he would say that people don't change, they transition. Everything is about incremental movement, communication, transparency, and understanding about the dynamics, looking at the pros and cons of the change, looking at the direct impact to you and your environment based on where you sit in the organization, and really being very clear about that. Once you're clear about that, you need to begin to look at and give honor to the past. If you know indeed the change is going to occur, for the moment that everything was created, it was the right time for the right reason, and you were utilizing the resources you needed to use at that time. The paradigm just changed. And so now you want to thank the people for all of their hard work they've done to get you to this particular stage. Mm-hmm. And the next aspect, you want to begin to include employee at the lowest level you possibly can, mm-hmm. in terms of them feeling like there's a level of inclusion. Because here's the issue. When you're dealing with change, the first thing that people want to know, so if you're going to incorporate me or you're going to leave me out, what's the impact to me? And better yet, if I'm going to help you, what's in it for me? So you got to be very clear about what's in it for the employees as you incorporate them, and be able to give that storyboard to them, and they understand it from a very personable standpoint. Because remember, I said you are basically penetrating their mindset and their heart, and the values of who they are, their work ethic, all of that is forthcoming once you are able to achieve that. I'll stop there for a moment, Rhett.
So when you're going through this process as a leader, you've got your management team, you've got your key staff positions, you've got your key people. On that team, are there other natural leaders or other leaders in the organization that may not have a title, but that people respect and follow, and that you need to, they're influencers, so to speak. I don't like that word, yes. But that you really need to bring in the process as well, because people are going to listen to them and what they have to say, and they make a difference no matter their title.
Okay.
Every organization's got people like that, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They're not in high ranks. They're not there in a capacity where you automatically think of them as a thought leader. I call that your environmental historian and your workplace historian. And it could be as low tier as the janitor, the individuals who work in the cafeteria of your environment, because years and watching change occur, 9 times out of 10, they've seen the cycle that you're about to go to, and they could probably even tell you what's going to work or not work. And so I make it my business in any environment I'm a part of or I'm consulting in. I want to know the lowest tier person possible. And when I go to a place that I'm doing some consulting work for right now, I walk in and I speak to the folks at the front door. I speak and talk to the janitors if they're coming in and out of bathrooms or buffering the hallway, because they know what's going on. They watch and observe. They are part of the system, but they don't have a voice. You can give them a voice.
Is there a point when you're going through this change management that, as a CEO or a leader, you've got a manager, you've got somebody on the team that is fighting it? Is there a time when at some point you say, okay, look, maybe we have to move on from each other, and is that fair? I mean, not to give people a little bit of time to adapt, or is there an appropriate time to sort of say, okay, you, I've been trying to get you to see this is coming, and to buy into where we're going and how things are going to evolve. It's not happening, and so
right.
We don't have time. I don't have time to babysit you on this, or I don't have time to bring you along. It's either get on board or we have to move on.
So let me
how do you handle that, and how do you know that? How do you know who those people are, and how do you handle that?
Oh, well, trust me, Rhett, they stand out. So part of what I would tell you, I want to go to the leader first, because In all of my consultative work and all of my work with leadership in companies, executive coaching, leadership development, there's something very, very clear to me about the character and the capability of a leader. And you know the best time to look for the true character of a leader? When times are hard and when they're tough and when they are in transition, there's change left and right. And regardless of whether we want to accept it or not, there may not be any direct change with us as a leader, but there's change happening around you in the larger organization that eventually will have some impact. So you're always trying to mitigate change. So I would say, first and foremost, leaders, watch how you behave during good times, and more so watch how you behave and operate during not so good times, because that's when people tell what your true character is. So I just wanted to say that first.
Yeah. But if you have leaders who aren't buying into the change, that's going to impact your morale. It's going to impact whether you're successfully move the company or the organization through that change. And so to me, it seems like the longer you drag your feet on some of these people who are entrenched and don't want to move, that it does more damage.
And it's also telling of your ability to manage, connect with your people, and with the notion of not leaving anyone behind. There are times that you don't have the luxury to not leave some people behind because you're moving expediently.
Right.
And then as the leader, it's when I talked about good times versus bad time and how people are watching you, if you haven't established those rapports, you won't have a direct effect on that individual that's stuck because you haven't built a relationship with them in the past. Because if they trust you, they know through what you've done with them over a historical period of time, how you react and whether you will have their back and do the right things for the right reason. So everything goes back to the quality and dynamic of your relationship and that true trust. Now, I didn't finish your question. So the back end of this is this whole notion of how do you move those individuals that appear to be stuck. And change and transition is so influential on us, both negative and positive. You're going to have a caliber person that says, great, some things need to change around here. And you're going to have some individuals who are constantly looking to shake things up and change. And they will move along very quickly. The core question you want to ask the individual that's struggling with the change and you're having difficulty moving them is a very, very simple question, which leverage your already relationship or continue to build the relationship. So for instance, Rhett, you appear to be having difficulty transitioning as we go through these changes. I'm not sure of what to make of that, but I really would like to know, first of all, how can I help you to process it? Or better yet, tell me what you're feeling and what you're afraid of.
Do you think people will answer that honestly?
Yes, they will, because they have nothing to lose.
Okay, because they know what's coming.
They know what's coming. They see it, and they know that it's going to be extraordinary in terms of change. But if I'm able to tell you, well, Rhett, I'm struggling with, and so, okay, well, let's talk about how we can work on that. Because I value you as a key contributor to this organization. I see you in the future, but I need you to come along with us now. And we can't wait for you to struggle and stand and run in place.
Right. That's a really good way to put it, isn't it? I mean,
it's kind of how my mind works.
Yeah. I mean, that seems to me that's sort of the right message. And it says the same thing though, right? It says get on board or or else.
But intrinsically, what it says is, I
I
care.
care. Right. I care.
Because most people don't think you care.
Right. I want to bring you along. I care.
Yes.
I see you struggling. This is
Help
my
me
attempt to try
understand
to help.
why you're struggling.
Right. And this is my attempt to help.
Yes.
Right. I like that approach. Is there so is there something you can do in terms of when you have your, as a leader, then you're counting on your mid-level management and your senior management to get on board and help sort of bring this all the way through the organization. Are there some tools or things that you can do to help them help their people? I mean, are there, because at that point you almost become a coach for this, right? As the CEO or the leader, you're almost the coach for the people who are having to push this along in the organization.
Well, the problem with
let me ask you this too, is there a right way for a leader to address the whole team? I mean, there's so many tools out there now. Even if you have a remote team and you have teams all over the globe, there are really good ways that you can get these kind of messages out. You can have these open discussions, and is technology a really good tool now to help us do that as leaders?
Oh, absolutely. So I would say, Rhett, that the first thing I would encourage leaders to consider is, if you have a remote team, and I think about being remote in a variety of ways, because being a former human resource executive from Motorola, where I've had to do business in lots of different countries and different time zones, it's always important to look at who do you have that you can reach out and touch, and they're in a conference room. And then you look at those individuals that you may have on a conference call that's in another state or even in another country on a conference call, and look for commonality of how you would pull the team together, for the simple fact that in each environmental area, yes, they are attached to your organization, but they have environmental things where they're at in a remote office or out of the country that are going to be an influence on kind of the change in dynamic. So look for ways that you can kind of normalize and put everyone at the same state. On the onset of a given change initiative, you want to pull your critical people together, as we talked about those in critical paths, and you get change champions, transition champions across the organization that fit that criteria. You want to say, okay, we have to figure out what we know, what we don't know, and we see the change forthcoming, and we have to put together a communication that says, here's what we know, here's what we don't know quite yet, and we're still waiting for some responses. And here's something else we want you to understand. I've convened a broad team to start talking and creating a plan for this. And when you have that first meeting that you're able to cascade across the organization, everyone automatically feels that you've been inclusive and you've been wide and you've been at some level of depth in the organization to ensure that people are represented.
So I'm always surprised by this. And you and I both are coaches, and we see a lot of different things going on in companies. But I'm constantly surprised that how often they just kind of wing it with change.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Instead of actually having a plan. I mean, to me, and let me just know what you think. To me, it's something you have to really put a lot of thought in and bring a lot of people into, and actually have a game plan. I mean, almost, I'm a proponent of having a written plan for it, right?
Yes.
When you do this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to roll it out. This is how we're going to tell people and talk about it. And I mean, almost develop a message for it, and have it done in that way, because otherwise, you and I are getting ready to work on a project, and there are a bunch of rumors, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
and there's stuff going around the community and around town and all over the place, and it creates this uncertainty. And so I think actually having a plan and written out where you know what you're going to do and how you're going to react, I think is essential. I mean, you see people that just often wing it. I mean,
Well, absolutely. And I was just thinking as you were talking about the fact that not only do they just wing it, they, and we have to admit this, there's a lot of our leaders who were never taught how to manage change. And so they don't have a perspective or any type of depth that they can pull from to say, when times look like this, here's what you might want to consider. And so I think things like what you're doing, Rhett, is exposing terminology, process, strategy, and planning. That's very, very helpful for those people who don't have the training. The other aspect that I would encourage us to look at from a leader perspective is that when you see change forthcoming, the normal defense mechanism, put my head down, just keep working, give it some time, it'll go away. It doesn't work. Okay? It simply does not work. The other aspect, I've heard leaders say, well, it is my hope that we are able to do this, this, and this. Let me tell you, folks, hope is not a method, nor is it a strategy. And it won't get you anywhere unless it's spiritually grounded. It's not workable in a workplace environment.
I love that. That's what I was looking for tonight. That one nugget. I love that. So what's we'll wrap it up because we both have, we actually have a meeting we both have to get to. What is the best advice you ever got? And who gave it to you?
Well, I was thinking about this, and actually just today alone, I was responding to a post and a podcast that was produced with me in it, talking about but leadership and diversity and inclusion. And I was thinking about what I was going to write to put it out there. And I chose to put a quote that I got from a second grade teacher. I know you're going to laugh at this, but it was in the second grade teacher and I think you're what, 7 or something like that when you're in the second. And I had a teacher to say, Mr. Frazier, would you please come up to my desk? She called me up front and she said, you didn't do this homework. And I was about to say, yes, I did, and almost get in kind of a little argumentative mode. But my grandmother and my mother and all of the really strong Black women that raised me that was saying, boy, don't you do that. And I said, okay, I thought I did. So I took a neutral approach. And she said, I want you to walk over in that corner. I would encourage you to sit there for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. And Rhett, that 5 minutes seemed like 5 years. And then she called me back up front and she said some of the most simplistic thing you could ever imagine. She says, Mr. Frazier, if you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over?
Love it.
So that's my pearls of wisdom. And I put that thought process into the quality and depth of everything I do. That's my check and balance. And that helps me to really determine whether I'm doing a marginal job or an extraordinary job.
Well, let's have a conversation one day about that question right there. How to know whether you're doing an extraordinary job or just an okay job. I'd like to dig into that a little bit at some point. This has been the Power Lunch. thank you so much for joining us, spending some time with us this afternoon. You certainly asked your questions. I know we didn't get to them online today, but Eugene and I will both certainly answer them if you ask them. And look, you can check out the website. We've got a great schedule coming up, powerlunch.live. You can actually get the podcast now. We're converting the video, the online program to the podcast. So we're slowly uploading new episodes every week and trying to catch up with all the past shows. You can also see the full shows on my YouTube channel, which again, you can get to through Power Lunch Live. You can see all the past episodes right there. You can also, if you want to watch them on LinkedIn and share them with your network, you can watch them through the hashtag powerlunch.live. That's the hashtag powerlunch.live. Thanks for spending some time with us this afternoon. You are why we do the show. Eugene, thank you so much, man.
Thank you, Rhett.